Hello, everybody. Just going to say yes to all the AI note takers who decided to join us today and the humans. The irony is starting to get evened out in the two. If this is your first time with us, this is definitely not meant to be a lecture. It's meant to be interactive. That said, in this particular setup today, I think we're going to have a couple hundred people live. And so, wow, the note takers are crushing today. We're gonna have a couple hundred people live, and so a lot of that interaction is, for better or worse, gonna have to happen in the chat. So to help you find the chat, we always start with a question. Today's question is gonna be right on the nose, and that is, what are you finding most painful about your one-on-ones today? So if you're a leader and running one-on-ones, what's painful about them with your team? If you are someone who is occasionally showing up to a one-on-one with your manager, what makes that painful? Just drop it in the chat. We'll compile a big old list. So while you're doing that, I wanted to give you a couple recent studies we came across as it pertaining to AI and a couple stats. If you had joined us last week, you'll have heard these before, but just quickly, I think the reason many of you are here is because 91% of leaders are pushing their teams to use AI, which is an outrageously high number. At the same time, in a second study, only I don't even know. This is getting crazy today. Only 9 of those 91% of leaders who are telling their teams to use it, only 15% are using it themselves. And so I really do think you need to get, the only way that I've found to really crack through on the AI work is to get your hands dirty, get in there and actually start using it. And it's just not one of those things we can simply read about. We have to get in there. And so our goal today, there's such a huge, giant landscape, is just to start on the basics. Like, how can we take sound practices that pertain to your one-on-ones and give you some basic prompts and tools that might help you supercharge them? So with that, 3 years ago, Mar and I created the Management Accelerator. We were looking at the common skills and systems and tactics that worked for me at places like Bridgewater and Moody's. For Mar, worked at places like Goldman Sachs and Google. You flash forward to today, we've run this program more than 30 times. We've worked with more than 1,200 leaders, and leaders from companies like all of the Magnificent Seven companies of Amazon and Apple and Facebook, down to new founders and small business owners with 5 employees. And then about a year ago, those Accelerator alums kept asking us, like, do you have something that goes a little bit deeper on the basics for new managers? And so we created Management Fundamentals. As you can see on the slide, we actually have both of these programs starting over the next couple months. Fundamentals starts a week from today in this exact time slot. And Management Accelerator starts in mid-May.
Hey, Dave,
and so,
do you want to share the slides?
Yeah, I sure do. Good call, Mar. Sorry, I'm getting all thrown off with all the extra fancy things joining today.
Guys, awesome. Thank you in the chat. Like, really some great reflections on the pain of one-on-ones. If you've just joined us, the sort of prompt to get us rolling is, what is painful today in your one-on-one experiences?
Awesome. See the slides now, Mar?
Yep.
Perfect. So yes, fundamentals, new managers coming up in a week, Accelerator, experienced leaders coming up in a month. And if you stick around for the 30 minutes, we'll give you a code that gets you 10% off either of those 2 programs this week. So I am seeing the one-on-one pain. Let's see. I'm just going to kind of flip through, see what we've got in here. Expectations mismatch, outcomes and follow-up, keeping it personal, encouraging new team members. Awesome. Yes. I do feel like this is one of those meetings that has almost got a reputation that precedes itself. And for better or worse, a lot of that reputation is negative, and I don't know that it needs to be. Some of the, as Mar and I were sort of going through this content beforehand, we were saying, almost no one comes to our program saying, like, help me with my one-on-ones, but many people leave saying, like, wow, the way that you transfer my one-on-ones allowed me to get better in all these other different domains. How do I give feedback? How do I set expectations? How do I do follow-up? And when we're going through it, some of the common pain that we heard, and I think I'm seeing a lot of this in the chat, right? One, my boss always cancels it. So nothing is less rewarding than preparing for a meeting that gets canceled. The only thing that makes it even less rewarding is it's the one meeting about you, and nothing says the work I'm doing isn't important as your boss saying we're not going to do it. We often have too many topics, and so we never actually get through it all. So it always feels like you're behind and trying to dig out. The important stuff gets skipped. The urgent constantly crowding out the important and the strategic. And so it never quite meets the highest marks of how that time could be used. Another version is just status updates in disguise, right? Or related, my boss doesn't read all the reports I create in advance, and so we end up rehashing everything I prepared anyways. Another one might be my reports keep everything at a surface level, or they come unprepared, right? You're starting to see the pain on both sides of the ledger. You know what? I see my team all the time. We're chatting about things like this is just a redundant meeting. But my question for people who have that pain would be like, well, how often are you zooming out into really developing them, into solving more strategic problems, into really slowing down and doing what is impactful versus just what is urgent? Some will say there's not enough trust for people to just, for the real talk, for us to get under the real things. It's very much you're only getting the good news and they're hiding the bad news. And so how do you draw that out? And then last, my favorite recent addition to this list is there's all these really cool, famous CEOs telling us they're stupid. Jensen Huang from NVIDIA, I don't do one-on-ones. I have 50 direct reports and I bring their whole teams together to meet with me. Brian Chesky from Airbnb, same thing. The one thing I would nudge you all back on is you can't cherry pick the one part of the system that you want to hear, which is like, don't do one-on-ones. Jensen Huang has 50 direct reports and he answers 300 emails a day personally without help. So as long as you're signing up to answer 300 emails a day, then sure, you can get rid of your one-on-ones and meet with hundreds of people every week. But if you're not willing to do that, if you're not a founder who's been attached to a company for 25 years in the same industry and managing the entire product roadmap yourself, you probably want to have one-on-ones. And you probably wouldn't be here if you didn't. So after leading teams for 20 years, these are the rules I settled on. And I settled on them mostly because I paid the price for doing the opposite too many times. Number one, you have to care, right? And it seems obvious, but there's a lot of people, and I think even myself early in my career, this idea of separating church and state, like there's work and then there's personal. But in reality, I think people are trying to increasingly bring their whole selves to work, and you sort of need to know what's going on in their whole life if you want to get the most out of them when they're doing, focus on your mission. The second is going to be consistency. I'll say it again, like don't cancel. I was speaking last week to a group of about 400 leaders, all of whom have one-on-ones, right? They're all managing people. They all have one-on-ones. I'm like, oh, who has one-on-ones? Everyone raise their hand. Great. How many of you have canceled your one-on-one in the last week? Half the hands went down. Great. How many of you have canceled a one-on-one in the last month? Now 95% of the room is down. Again, productivity and the retention of your best talent, they want to know, like, am I having an impact? Does my manager care? Am I growing and developing? And canceling these meetings undermines all three of those. Number three, coach. The test for me is, am I spending most of my time asking questions, helping them write their own script, helping them arrive at their own answer, or am I spending most of my time telling and directing them? When it's mostly questions and coaching, it's usually a great one-on-one, high value impact. It deals with a lot of those problems. When I'm directing, it's usually delving into the status report micromanagement world. The next three, empower. You want to make it their meeting. I'm going to show you how on the next slide, because I think this is probably the number one part that actually makes this viable. Encourage. I tend to be like a lot of people, which is, like our minds are Velcro for the negative and Teflon for the positive. So I see the problems, I see the critical feedback. I can do that in real time. I believe in ongoing feedback. But in reality, if you want your people to do the best, you have to catch them winning, right? You have to call out the things you want them to replicate because they're doing well. So this was my guardrail, like using this meeting to say, like, if I hadn't caught them winning this week, this is my chance to do it. And then lastly, I'm thinking about this as, what are the highest value ways I can remove blockers? I can enable them. I can support them. I can get things out of their way so that they can do what they're best at. Now, this is usually when someone in the chat will write, Yeah, but how can I do these one-on-ones and all these agendas? How am I supposed to stay on top of all these areas? And again, I'd underscore this one, that you have to make it their meeting. Like this is probably the single biggest unlock for me, and it was born of necessity. At one point, following a reorg, I was managing 17 people. There was just no way I could both do one-on-ones and actually be responsible for, shaping the agenda and driving them. And so I flipped it. Now, this usually makes most managers panic because they start to freak out. Like, I'm going to lose control. It's not going to be my meeting. But the way you get through that is by sort of setting the expectation of how they can go in advance. So the key is you have to help them understand that you want them to be owners, right? You want them to show command of their area. But what does that mean practically? This works if they're this dashboard that I'm going to sort of share with you and the key questions underlying it. It works for individual contributor software engineer, and it works for someone running a huge division with managers of managers. And so if you align on the 6 questions up front, and then you give them this blueprint that they maintain, they can now own the meeting, and you can get all the things you want that I laid out in the previous slide. But let's walk through example to make it real. So the first question I want them to answer is, what do you think we should focus on, right? Like I want them to tell me, you have your time. I am the biggest piece on your chessboard. Where do you want to move me? How can I be most impactful for you? Point me at anything you want. By the way, you'll notice that you'll see some things updated in blue. If it's going to make it above the line to be on our list, show me the parts on the dashboard where it's updated to guide me to that. That's why, for me, it was in blue. The second question is going to be, how are you tracking against your goals, right? And so this does 2 things. One, it has us reiterate that we're aligned on the same goals. And then we start to get into well, how are you measuring that, right? If you have OKRs, this is where they fit. It can be goals, it can be projects, whatever is describing the work and the impact they're trying to have. And I'll walk you through an example from our world just as we do that. So let's say, that this first goal and objective, right? That we want to have a newsletter that makes $50,000 a year in profit. But then you can start to see ooh, interesting. Well, the revenue and the unsubscribes are sort of, they're trending negative, right? That's why they're in red. But the subscriber growth is growing green. So already I can start to see oh, there's a mixed story coming on here as I'm staring down at it. Once they're giving me the quantitative point of view, I also want them to give me the qualitative point of view, right? The notable wins and losses. The reason this can be important is because sometimes you can sort of see things average out, right? If I lose a key client, but I add 3 middle clients, I might have a number that looks like I'm flat. But in reality, there's a story underneath there. Why am I losing these types of clients? Why am I gaining these types of clients? And so this allows me to sort of see both sides because we can't measure everything. It also, and so you can see in our example, right, I'm picking up some good wins in terms of being featured in a certain magazine, in terms of getting a viral post, but there's some losses under there in terms of how these boosts are happening. Then I don't expect everybody, then we get into the evolution. How are they, if they sort of know their goals and their wins and losses, okay, how are they evolving against that, right? We tend to think of everything that we ask people to do as a system, right? They have a goal, they put together people, process, and design to get an outcome. Now, they might be the only person in that design, but again, they're trying to get an outcome. When the outcome's not good enough, they have to figure out the problems that are preventing that outcome, right? And so I don't expect people to be perfect. If they're doing ambitious things, they should be running into problems and solving them. So what I want to know is that they know the most important problems and that they have a path to deal with them and it's going to get dealt with. And so here you can sort of see us highlighting that within there. That's the work side. The other parts of the dashboard, especially if they're managing other people, is I want to know, do you have the team to sustain those outcomes and improve them over time? Right. And so I've asked them to be thinking about the impact that people have, the effort they're putting forth, what's that person's morale like? Are we at risk of losing them? So that's the retention piece. And then if anything's not green about them, give me a little detail as to why. Again, I don't need to zoom in and deal with it. I need to know that they're dealing with it, that they have their handle on what's going on their team, and that they've got a path to deal with it, or that they're going to pull me in strategically where I can be helpful to them. You can sort of see, in this particular case, we're highlighting ones to discuss. And then lastly, because one of my key things is going to be around them getting better, I use my one-on-ones to make sure I'm backstopping into their development plan, right? That we've figured out what is it that they're working on? How are we going to make them more impactful? How is the work helping them level up? And then while I might not revisit this one every single one-on-one, it gives us some rhythm. It gives us a reason to go back and say like, hey, how's that going? These actions you're taking, are you seeing the lift? Am I seeing the lift? Is feedback coming from other directions? Um, and so I'm going quickly, and we'll make this template available to you all if Mar hasn't already in the chat. The chat's flying, so I can't quite keep up with it.
Guys, I did drop the link and I'll drop it again in a second. And
Perfect.
yes, recording will be sent out tomorrow. So like feel free to like lean back and enjoy all of this. Will be in your inbox tomorrow.
So I would say even if you're just implementing these questions with this dashboard and you had to leave at 12:15, your one-on-ones would be massively improved, right? You're getting leverage as a leader. They're feeling empowered to own their own area. You get to feel more comfortable about what's going on. They sort of drive the responsibility and the goals ahead. They develop all the types of things that keep your A players engaged and growing, become inherent because you flipped it. Um, so, and the reason we feel so confident about this is, again, this is one of those places where the signal for us is what do we hear in our sort of our programs outbound surveys, and then what letters do we get from people in a month, in 3 months, and 5 months. This is one of the, I'd say this is one of the highest places where people come back and say like, oh, I implemented your dashboard and changed my one-on-ones with your team, and it's a total game changer. And we've gotten dozens of those, and so I know that this can be very helpful. I saw, for whatever reason, one popped out of my eyes. Someone's asking like how long. I think I saw a question on how long and how frequent. In general, I would say I've never been able to successfully do this less than once a month. If I tried to go slower than that, like businesses are moving a little bit too fast. I have not found very much value in doing it more than once a week. So if I have someone who's either new or struggling, I tend to be in the once a week category. I would say on average, I'm every other week. For people who are really like solid, I have a picture of them, they know what they're doing, they have a proven track record. We might stretch that out to a month, but I wouldn't go much more than that. Even if I'm not learning tons and tons and tons about their business, that's my backstop for the development piece, for helping them grow, for helping them be more impactful, for keeping them on their trajectory. So that's a shorthand. Also, in terms of duration, I find that once I've got this running this way, I can do it in a half hour. Because again, we're not transmitting status reports anymore, right? The dashboard is there. I can look down. They're saying I've got these 3 or 4 topics to get through. I might bring a topic or two that come in behind them. And we've sort of built a rhythm of really valuing like the highest ROI and fast impact. And we'll do some more questions at the end as well. I don't want to get too, I know some folks will have a hard stop at the half hour. So look, use this dashboard, ask those questions, flip it over and make it theirs, and you're going to get huge ROI. And that was before we had AI to help us. So now let's spend the second half and see if we can juice this up with some AI. If you happen to have joined us last week, we spent quite a bit more time sort of setting up some of the basics of how you might use AI, sort of giving some key definitions, et cetera. I'm not going to revisit that. Mar will share that link as well. That's recorded. You can hop in there if you want to go back. The thing I did want to say on this slide, I think the key takeaway is a lot of times when we start playing with different parts of AI, we tend to judge it exclusively on quality, right? The red X, like, is this as good as the person I work with or I would have done myself on the first shot? And the answer is, if you judge it that way, you're going to be really disappointed. But it's instead, you start to think about, well, how fast can I get to 80% quality? How fast can I do 4 iterations of this email? Or how fast could I ask AI for 5 or 6 iterations of evaluating this dashboard? And the answer then is AI starts to feel like magic. And the other thing about this is that it's sort of the key to using it in this way is to get to sort of 80% quality, but in really, really fast time, short time frames, is you have to know, well, what is AI good at? And what is it maybe you're asking it to go too far and you still have to retain control as a human? And I'd say the easiest way for me to think about it is this sort of a quick framework I'd call impact, right? Like the range of activities that allow us to make that impact, right? In the most basic, you can clearly define tasks or processes, which are just strings of tasks for an AI to execute. The more predictable, the more computers just tend to be the right choice. So that's not really new news. It's not even AI specific, but if it's a repeatable task, great. Now communicate, like GPTs are really good at that too. Especially if we become more and more conscious about how we want their help by telling them the style, the context, the tone, train them on things we've written before, train them on transcripts of when we've spoken. That can be extremely helpful. It's also really good at analyzing. Like there's a reason, again, there's a reason computers have been analyzing for a while. Now the AI is just making it smarter. It allows it to use these capabilities at greater scale and greater speed. When you get past that line and get up into the other work, right? Like how do you problem solve? How do you make decisions? How do you imagine? It can support you in giving you suggestions, giving you ideas, giving you pros and cons. How, again, but it's mostly falling back into the analyst, and you're going to have to do the work. And so I think, again, I sort of wanted to just frame that of like a lot of what we're going to focus on is going to be the bottom half. Like, how do you get this to give you better, faster, more robust analysis that maybe you don't have the time for, or maybe you don't have the capacity for, right? Like it's helpful to have a tool trained on all human knowledge. And how we can do that in the context of a one-on-one. So to do that, I think one of the key things to use AI most effectively is you have to have a picture of what excellent looks like. And it's actually getting harder because as AI gets better and better and better, it sounds reasonable, but reasonable doesn't mean right. And so you have to have a sense of like, is the advice I'm getting or the analysis I'm receiving back in the same way you would with a human giving you this information? You have to have a way to judge and say, is this good or is this not good? Or is this close, but it needs to be refined? And so I am finding it personally easier and easier to get seduced by AI sounding pretty good versus being great. And so it's a reminder for myself and for everyone else, like make sure you're really being critical of what you get back. Now, when I roughly think about like, well, what is great leadership? If I have a self-aware leader that can like go in the world and recruit great talent and then develop and coach and drive their high performance, have them work together as a team that by setting the mission, the strategy, the culture, and the goals, all while making high quality decisions and solving the most impactful problems, there's a pretty good chance that in an 80-20 way, that's a darn good leader, right? If you can do the things on this list, I would bet on you. And then for each one of these, you need an approach that you can reliably use to both deliver on the outcomes and compound your approach, right? That we think about leadership in a systems thinking. And so, you sort of look at that, even that first, example around developing self-awareness, right? If I have a system, if I'm constantly soliciting feedback, and then I'm using that feedback to reflect on, where am I strong and where am I weak and what might that be like? I'm folding that into my next set of development activities to get better in certain ways, and I'm refining my picture, right? And I'm only going to keep doing that over and over. That's my approach. That's my framework. That's my machine for driving higher self-awareness. And the reason that I wanted to focus on one-on-ones, and the reason it's like the meeting I just refused to cancel is when I think about it through this lens of great leadership, it shows up on almost all these, right? It is going to show up on like how you set goals, how we do performance management, development, coaching, decision-making, problem solving. Like it's just this great high ROI vehicle when done correctly. Now, if we introduce AI, each of these machines can be enhanced, right? Like if you're just getting started, you can just start to use basic prompts, right? Something basic so you can do things a little bit faster, make your analysis a little bit quicker. You could move up and say that there's tools that are being built by companies every single day. We'll give you a few examples that are going to unlock specific capabilities that maybe weren't even attainable before. And then we can get more advanced, right? We can get serious about this and start to think about how do you get AI operating on your behalf, whether that's with agents or model context protocols, where you're stringing things together and it's starting to operate as a partner. We're only going to scratch the surface. We're going to stay on the basic side today, but hopefully it should be enough to get you started. This is where we're going to zoom in. A couple places where you can use this to analyze the dashboards and make decisions, and even a couple of the tools. So quickly on number one, okay, how do we prepare for the meeting? And so admittedly, when you have good structured information, AI is especially good and adept at dealing with that. And so the dashboard is a bit of a cheat code. Like the fact that we were managing this way and you have a window into someone's whole area is quite helpful. Continuity helps too. So if you start to have this dashboard updated monthly, you can start to feed it multiple dashboards and compare it. And so I did a super basic prompt, which then gave me this result, right? Like I basically asked it to be a management consultant with people management experience at a high growth company like ours. And now here's the dashboard I got from my direct report. What do you think? Is pretty much what I asked. Like this is not a very sophisticated prompt, but I wanted to just see like, would it be any good? And it was actually quite remarkable. Um, uh, it lets me get away with just that simple structure of like, what's the role, what's the context, what's the artifact, and what's the ask. If I hadn't have gotten good insights, I could have added more. I could have put history on there, right? I could have had multiple dashboards. I could have told it specifically the job this person's doing, the types of goals, et cetera. I could have framed it and told it the types of things I wanted to analyze or different angles. I could have said format, right? I could have said, I want my output in a narrative, or I want it in a table or some other, I want it in a series of coaching questions. But even without that, even with this very simple prompt, it gave me concerns, it gave me discussion points. What was really shocking to me was in the recommended discussion points, it actually connected observations from multiple parts of the dashboard. It connected something that was a note on the work to something, to a concern about one of the people, and said like, hey, are you drawing this conclusion? And to be quite honest, I wasn't. And so I'm like, wow. Now imagine I'm like getting better and more refined with these prompts, and I'm managing this over time. Now we could have stopped here, but I didn't feel like I was equipped to answer one of the questions. It suggested that I probe into, this idea that the Beehive CPM issue needs immediate attention. What specific options are being considered? Now, I happen to know that Beehive's our newsletter platform, but I don't know much more about that. I happen to know CPM is advertising related, but I've never had an advertising background. And so I basically said, can you prep me to be able to go probe this and know whether or not I'm getting good or bad answers? And so it actually gave me a bigger framework than this. Like it gave me the same framework, but more details. I just condensed it so I could show you all. But again, if you're just sort of zooming out, you're like, that's not an unreasonable framework, right? That you look at the measurement, the content optimization, the ad placement, the audience quality, et cetera. But the part that it added that was super helpful was, and if I were in your shoes, I would ask these 5 questions. And oh, by the way, if you ask those 5 questions, here are the 5 or 6 red flags to listen for in the response. And so again, in this world where like as managers, we grow and we lead and we get more disconnected in certain ways, like in a 1-minute prompt, I was able to prepare and show up for this meeting to be able to go back and forth and hopefully coach and develop and listen for good answers or watch out for bad answers, simply by prompting it in this way. Now, as I was building this, it made me wonder, well, would the advice be any different if Claude, who was what we're using here, had a picture of what this manager was like? And so it turned out yes. So we use a psychometric test in our program. It's called Principles U. It was created by Ray Dalio and Adam Grant. It's free. We're big fans, especially because there's a comparison tool where you could, Mar and I will compare each other to how we're alike and how we're not alike. And when that creates a superpower of 1 + 1 = 3, and when that might give us a blind spot for our 2-person business. So I uploaded my result and asked it if this picture would change any of the advice. And it turned out yes. And it really honed in on this particular value that I highlighted, which is my low, detailed, and reliable score. And if I'm being completely honest with you all, like that is a well-known Achilles heel for me. And you can just see here how, you'd notice in each of these 3 sections, it started to adjust the coaching. It started to think about the things that I'm strong at and how you might tilt the coaching in a particular direction. Or, wow, I would really watch out for the fact that you're relying on this guy who's got this really low preference for being reliable to be reliable. And again, it's already work we had done because this profile exists. And all I did was literally just upload the PDF and ask it a very simple question. And so again, if you have a team of 3 or 5 or 6 people and you've got a profile like this, I think it would, I haven't tested it, but I believe it would work just as well with MBTI or with Golden or with DISC or with any of the other metrics. You're just creating slight refinements in the people and letting it draw connections and conclusions to prompt your thinking about your people and their work in a higher fidelity way. All right. those are more analyzed, sort of using prompts. I did want to just, we'll do one last one if I want to nail my one-on-ones, because I know we're running up on time. I would, well, this time we'll flip over to the software side. And I firmly believe if you are not using an AI transcription tool, you are choosing to do leadership on hard mode at this point. There are tons of them, right? I have Fireflies on here, Fathom, Otter, Descript, Zoom has a transcript tool, Google Meet has it, Teams has it. And just look, there's so much leverage. Like no more sitting in 60 minutes of meeting to hear 3 minutes that are relevant. You just get the transcript. As a leader, you get summaries, you get to-dos. You can go back to, here, to show you how we would use this here. Like you can go back to a specific section from the summary, and it'll take you literally into that part, and you can listen to it. So if it's not quite clear whether people were angry or happy or whether they weren't being clear, you can literally go listen to it and zoom right in. You can see things like you can see the sentiment. Right? Was this meeting positive? Was it negative? Which way did it go? You can see who's dominating the conversation. I had a coaching client who claimed that they were very good at seeking questions and sort of leaving airtime for everybody. And in the meeting with me, I pulled this up and was like, you've been talking for 80% of this meeting, and no, you're actually not that good at that thing you think you're good at. And so all of a sudden, this data that would have taken me, I don't even know how I would have compiled it 2 years ago. I had it instantaneously available to me because the transcript tool was running. And the other thing I'll say is like they're increasingly becoming real time. I just noticed Fireflies, the one we used, their last update about a month ago. I tried it yesterday. It was literally spinning on the side, and within a second of me saying it, typing out very accurate words. My hunch is that what's going to happen next is you're going to start to see more of these companies start to offer real-time coaching tips. Like listen, like seeing the sentiment in the room, seeing the questions, telling you, hey, you might want to circle back. It seems like people were still confused. Oh, you're in a sales call, and it seems like this person is disappointed in terms of this thing. You might want to come back and reposition it in a certain way. So anyways, I know that some legal departments, some compliance departments might be giving you a hard time about this. I think it's one of those places to find a way through because it's just such a valuable tool at this point. So with that, we always like to leave you with a one step you can practically take. And I would encourage you, like, go invert your one-on-one with one of your direct reports. Like, take our dashboard, go through the 6 questions, have them just do a 30-minute sketch of their team. Like, don't have them overinvest in it. Let them set the agenda based on that dashboard. Review it in advance. Use some of the basic prompts we share with you in AI and just have it double check your work, right? You look at what you would have probed, play with some AI prompts to figure out what it would probe, smash those 2 things together, go through the meeting, and then at the very end with that person, just compare it. How does this what type of one-on-one compare to the old one? Better or worse? Can we compound? Can we actually start to run the team that way? All right. Per my promise, you gave us 30 minutes. We're going to give you 10%. 10 for one-on-one code works for the rest of the week. You can use it for fundamentals. If you're a new manager, sort of 0 to 3 years experience, and you really want to go deep on the 80-20 basic skills of management. It also will work for the May Management Accelerator if you want to, which is targeting more experienced leaders. We'll spend a month together sort of building out more advanced systems for leading bigger teams. And with that, we'll hang around, we'll ask questions. I know we were going really, really fast. We want to try to make it as high value signal for you since, a couple hundred of you are giving us 30 minutes of your time. But Mara, I'll stick around until people run out of questions. Anything I missed in the chat, Mara? I know we were going pretty fast.
The chat was awesome. The chat was its own course on the right. And thank you to those like sharing tools you've used or questions.
Cool.
Guys, we were going really fast today. Like we see the 30 minutes as a challenge to have you come in and come away with tools or new ideas to try. We don't usually teach with bullet points and paragraphs on our slides, so we'll absolutely send that out. But I think a lot of the learning is seeing that step-by-step feedback from your AI intern. It's just incredibly valuable, right? We talk a lot about the value of like self-reflection as a leader, because how are you going to coach well unless you understand how you see the world? And continuing to use AI again as your doubles partner will just make those meetings more impactful.
Yeah, I see some like questions on like the LLMs, and man, I would love to say we just had endless hours in the day to bounce around and test them all. Like I agree with Mark. Like we got a little bit there was a pretty big breakthrough in Claude over the summer as it pertained to writing. And that all of a sudden we could get a lot of writing assistants and sort of iterate, became a writing assistant. Um, and then the one drawback to it was like it couldn't access the internet, and so then you're sort of balancing using OpenAI versus using Claude, but now Claude it's like by the week it just keeps changing and moving around. And some of it's just inertia, I think, honestly, because we're already getting so much lift, but it's cool to see what other people are doing in here. Anything else we missed, Mar? See the recording.
Yash had a specific question on the leader growth column in your dashboard. I think without it in front of me, it's referring to leader, meaning the person you're meeting with one-on-one.
Here and go back. So,
Oh, thank you.
sorry, which one more? The
Leader growth.
the bottom. So one of the very first module we teach in the Management Accelerator is called the Mindset of the Manager, and the output of that module is just a much higher fidelity picture of what you're like as a leader. Like we all have I think we all have a management brand, a leadership brand, whether we like it or not. And so partly what we're trying to do in there is to bring more consciousness to what our management brand is, and then intention to what we want it to become. And so then, well, then practically, what does that mean? It's like, it means we all need a development plan. It means we all sort of need to have an inventory of where we are and sort of where we want to go and what are the gaps we need to close between here and there. And then this is sort of the place where, for the people I'm managing, if I'm thinking of this as them meeting with me, I want them showing up and saying like, hey, we agreed, I'm going to get better in these two ways. And I can hold them accountable to, are they taking the action they committed to? They can sort of say like, hey, I've taken this action and it doesn't seem to be working, or I'm trying certain things and it's okay here and not okay there. And so it's just for me, it's a forcing mechanism for them to be the owner of their development plan, but to give me the surface area to see that they're doing it and be able to coach and help them iterate along the way. So that's the spirit of that section. It's not every meeting. It's mostly on the dashboard to make sure we don't miss it over the course of like several months.
Mm. Also, because we tried to go like very action packed, right? We had a dashboard, we have frameworks that we tried to fill in. Principles U, we brought in as just one specific example to solve the problem of like, what am I like and what are they like? It's just one tool. We like it, we've used it a lot. It's been backed by a lot of science. And one of the differences, as opposed to just getting a readout about what Mar is like, it's what is Mar like in working with Dave, and like how is that going to be easy and how is that going to be hard? So I'd love for anyone on this call to sort of try it, like set aside 30 minutes, have a cup of coffee, answer it and how you actually are, not how you aspire to be. And I'll drop my email in again if you want to just have like a free look at like how you would compare to someone like me.
Here, Mar, why don't we just, since we're on it for 2 minutes and people are asking about it here. So this is the comparison tool of Mar and I, right? So I am more of an explorer, Mar's more of a coach. You can see it breaks it down into like how you think, how you engage. And so here's that detailed and reliable problem, right? Where neither of us are particularly detailed and reliable, which is why probably 7 of you found a typo today. And I'm like, right, there it is. But so it's great. Like we have this picture. We're like, oh, we have a collective blind spot. And so what do we want to do about it? We could pretend it's not true, or we could start to create systems to deal with it. We could find people to add to the team who are at the opposite end of the spectrum. And you sort of do that, and then you sort of say to yourself, okay, I know that I'm adding this person to be complementary over here, which means they're probably going to do things that drive me crazy, and I'm probably going to do things that drive them crazy. And so how do we, but even that awareness and that language is very helpful to then actually making the crazy come way down. Another one I'll often talk about when I'm speaking, I'll put this up, like Mar and I tend to like attack problems in different conceptual ways. Like I tend to, and depending on the problem, that can be super helpful or that can be really annoying for one of us. So I would say the most common example is, Mar will be like, oh, should we meet with this CEO tomorrow? It's a very practical question, which is like, do you want to have a meeting or not? It requires a yes or a no. And usually my answer will be like, I think we should zoom out and start with the Romans. Like we should go out a couple centuries and really understand what's important. And she's just like wants to kill me. Um, but what's great is like we know this about each other, and we've gotten to develop a language where she will say like, I don't really want to talk about the Romans, or I'll say like, Hey Mar, I know you really want to get this done, but I actually think it's really important for us to zoom out and sort of see the holistic picture, and that will help us answer the question. So, anyways, there's a whole bunch of in this tool that does things like this. The part we really like about it is the fact that the comparison part is free. I think a lot of the companies that do this get you to take the tool, but then to apply it and see it with other people, they make you pay. So, um, and I grew up with it for 10 years at Bridgewater, so that didn't hurt.
And then there's the question that often comes up. What about your life partner? And yes, we've had so many students come through and be like, so I had my husband, wife, partner take this last night, and wow, was it informative. Um, yeah, I think that it's like any of these tools, right? If you make the space and try to thoughtfully answer the question, some things make sure if you do go through Principles U, make sure you read through what the headlines say. Like I scored very high on status seeking, which like killed me because I didn't think that was accurate. But what it meant is even if we disagree or negotiate, when we leave the table, I want you to be like, I could work with Mar again. It's sort of being well thought of, which is very much on point.
People pleaser.
So the end.
The other thing that Mar would often say here is, if you do decide to do this, the other way to use a partner is to actually have them looking over your shoulder while you're lying to yourself to the answers to the questions. Because definitely there's at least of the whatever 80 questions, I think Mar stopped me on 8 to 10 of them to be like, I think that's who you aspire to be, but that's not who you actually are. Um, which is great. And that this tool will be better if you're really embracing reality to say like, this is who I actually am. You can always, one of the lines that I remember about this specific tool, but I think applies to a lot of them, is like traits are not fates. So you're only answering questions to have an understanding of your preferences. So you may have a preference to be introverted or be extroverted. It doesn't mean you can't do the opposite. It just usually means it takes more energy. Like the stronger you are at one extreme, the harder you have to work to flex. But we all can flex. And so getting that accurate view of what I'm like sort of gives you the hints of like how hard you're going to have to flex to do those things, or how complementary people would be if they're on the other end of the spectrum. So what else? This is quiet. Like we're quiet today. Someone come off mute so I could stop hearing myself talk. Or don't.
Hey, Dave,
CPM, what did we miss?
I can throw something at you, Dave, if you can hear
Yeah,
me.
please.
Hey, sir. So one thing too is we all can be in different parts of management depending on your company or organization with as far as layers and bureaucracy goes. Um, can you give us any like approach or best practices around like when you actually want to take something as great as this, apply it with your team and you start getting momentum? I know there's a lot of manage up, manage your executives, things like that. Have you ever been derailed or thrown off, and how did you approach that to keep things on track with some of your best practices?
I have certainly been derailed and thrown off, because you're effectively, if I just sort of say back the problem to you, right? I as a leader, I'm trying to have like a system that is tailored and optimized for me. And then I'm trying to plug that into um, the people I'm managing up to, probably some peers, et cetera. And like that interface sometimes is going to be very natural and well aligned, and other times it's going to be not. And then you're dealing with, well, how receptive is the other half of that interface to what I'm trying to do? Is that roughly right?
Yes, sir. Right on the money.
The when I'm purposely choosing not down because I think for the most part you can use your position to manage down. Um, the the biggest hack that I've found is figuring out why my system solves their problem. You know why it solves yours, and when you're trying to pitch them on why it solves your problem, it's not that useful to them. But so if it's my manager, I'm like, what is it that's causing them pain? Right? Like, is it this meeting we're having is inefficient? Okay, cool. Let me show you how this, is I can give you back half your time if we follow my approach. Or Yeah, it's sort of the specifics matter, but the general strategy is connect my solution to their pain, not my pain. Um, and then if I get them to agree on the problem and the pain, and then I'm like, well, do you have a way to solve that problem? I have a way to solve that problem, but like maybe there's better ways, and you can help refine my system. Usually they don't, and so all of a sudden you can try it. Now the second part of this is I would then go to the try it word is on purpose. Call it an experiment. So the other way you bring people, when people feel like you are changing laws, they fight back. They're like, ooh, this is going to change. I'm never going to get it back. Like we're going to lose the Supreme Court and that's never going to happen again. Versus, hey, boss, like, yep, we have this pain. We agree. I have this idea. Would it be cool if we just experimented with using this dashboard in this format for the next 2 or 3 of these meetings? If it's better, then we can keep it. And if it's not, we can just fall back to the way we were doing it. And usually people are, once they hear experiment, they're like, yeah, sure, because the data will tell us the answer. And then we all know in reality, like once the experiment starts, most people will fall into inertia. And so you're doing the experiment, you'll get the data, you'll make it a little bit better. And they're not going to come back to you in a month to be like, let's evaluate the outcome of that experiment and decide whether the one-on-one should keep going this way. So those are sort of my 2 moves, like connect it to their pain and then offer an experiment. And usually that'll get you through 80% of them.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. And thank you for coming off mute. It was nice to hear somebody other than me. Let's see. What's one successful real life scenario you could share who immensely benefited from this framework and dashboard? Is Deep still on? It's like I just want to want one more sentence to be able to answer the question well, because mostly the feedback we've gotten back either comes in the form of somebody who was constantly canceling their one-on-ones as the manager. Like they were the ones canceling it because they're like not prepared. They hadn't gotten their arms around it. And so they just couldn't keep up. And so the real leverage was flipping it to say like, you don't have to keep up. They keep up and then you respond. And then you're managing and coaching on top of them keeping up. Or it was more in the other set of problems, which was like, we're not covering the most important stuff. It's just status reports, et cetera. So we were pulling a lot of the like lower value activities up and into the dashboard. And because we're just making the changes month over month, it became higher leverage for the person maintaining the dashboard. And it pulled all the sort of transmission of basic information out of the meeting so that it became much more problem solving, decision making, and coaching. I'd say like those were the 2 flavors of feedback that we got. But I'm not sure if I'm 100% answering your question. So I just want to, if there's more to add, I'm happy to expand.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
Um, so I used this today coaching one of my team members, and we need to get a private assistant for this particular team member. And so what I did was I didn't know about this. I basically just thought about it by default. I uploaded their disk profile
Yeah.
into ChatGPT and just said, like what, your role is to advise um, uh, me on Jock's profile. Can you please match a suitable candidate to what kind of profile would they need? This profile. Sorry, I've got dogs at home and they're barking.
No problem.
So I found
We have
that
a
very
16-8 It's like 6-1.
What I do, one question I just need to ask you quickly. I trip up with a detail. I can probably come up with all these systems, but I battle to follow them myself. And I just have a quick question there. When do you create these templates in a Google Doc? Like, what are the basics? So you're going to be seeing someone on a regular, let's say a weekly session. And are you going to be creating blank templates for them and sending them the template to fill out before the time? Or do you just have these blank templates available? Because I mean, their projects basically stay the same for say a 90-day period, don't they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
You
I've
just
seen people run
pre-populate.
them. I've seen people
Yeah.
run them in a few different ways. And I'll just give you what's worked for me.
Okay.
For the most part, so there was a 2 or 3 parts to your question. I think there's like the getting started and then the ongoing. Um,
Yes.
on the getting started, the answer is it depends a little bit on the person you're managing. Like if I'm managing a seasoned manager, we've been working together a while, et cetera, I might just give them the blank template and be like, hey, we've been, you know the goals, you know the measures, like can you just let's just use this as our way of sort of doing this. If it's like someone relatively new in their career and they're going to be overwhelmed by like how do I even frame my job into the top 3 goals or the top 5 projects or whatever else, or you're not currently running a system somewhere else that tells them that answer, I might spend a little time to go through and be like, hey, let's just do the first one together. Like, oh, here's a project, here's how we're measuring it. Like I think we're having these 3 problems. You think we're having these 3 problems? And I think we have solutions for 2 of the 3. I guess we have to figure out, I would just sort of take them through one and be like, hey, can you do this for the other 3 projects? So that's getting started. Once I think the value for me of the dashboard is not making them rewrite it every time. So the reason I had some of the like context in blue is to your point, like it doesn't necessarily change every minute at this level, right? There's details and tasks and deadlines that are low level down that change, but at the
Right.
level of us zooming out and saying like, do you have command of your area and your 4 key projects? It's slower, and so I'm mostly just like make a copy and update the things and put them in a different color so I can look right at them and know what changed and what didn't. And so can you. And that's going to be the foundation. And so the first one usually takes a while, right? To sort of give a comprehensive status report on your whole job. It probably takes them 60 to 90 minutes to get it right the first time. But then those updates tend to be 15 to 20 minutes. And in my mind, I'm like, because we're meeting every other week or, maybe once a month, but usually every other week, is it worth 15 to 20 minutes every other week for them to step back and say, how's this whole thing going? In my mind, absolutely.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think that's so. What I'm hearing is if the follower is mature or the team member's a mature team member, then we'd
Mhm.
probably we'd give them delegate that opportunity to them to basically
Yep.
update on a regular, keep their little folder going, and then update it so that we just check in on an odd time, and maybe also to record a video
Mhm.
of filling in one process, and then you can basically send it off to a slightly immature person
Well,
to
100%. It's funny you mentioned that because in last week's session, one of the things we talked about is just this idea of using Loom videos, right? Like throw up your
yeah,
screen, hit record on Loom. You can talk them
right,
through literally doing it. They can watch you type it if you want, like however you want to do it. And then to your point, they could hear your tone. You can put in color. The stakes of it being a perfectly written email come way down because you're just talking, and it lives forever. It's just great. It's
right.
both showing and telling. So totally agree. Especially good for
Thank
remote teams.
Yeah, and the idea of Loom came up too when people were like, beyond the dashboard, you have like certain rules about what you want to do asynchronously versus live, org updates, system updates, company updates. And typically, if I hear the word update, but your tone is really important, like please do a Loom instead of writing a note, especially if it's late on Friday, right? Somebody might take a message with them that's actually off key, right? Depending on how they read your Slack message or something like that.
Right.
And I think too, I love Dave reminding you it's an experiment. Like, hey guys, we're really trying to make sure your one-on-ones are hugely impactful. Let's try to pull some work forward. People might feel like you're pushing work on them, but reframing it is like, hey, this is you owning your work, right? Like orgs change, things change. I wouldn't market it this way, but like they might,
No, makes
you know what I'm up to, but like
yes.
it's not the same as owning your work, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is the framing is very important. Framing it in a way that sits well with them. Thanks,
Yeah.
guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks for the question.
You're
Thanks.
welcome.
Yeah.
I would say the one other thing on top of the framing, if you're going to ask them to use a dashboard, the one thing you have to commit to is consuming it. There is maybe second behind canceling the one-on-one. The other demotivating thing is for someone to invest a whole bunch of time getting you a dashboard that you couldn't be bothered or organized enough to read. And I say that as a low detailed and reliable person who did that to his poor people more than once. So don't be me. Roland, you had a question on using this for prospective people. I'd love to just I was trying to sort of see if I could get myself there, but I'd be curious if you just give me 1 or 2 more sentences on how you were thinking about how you might use it with a recruit.
So I'm just wondering, as the recruits, if they use this, could they tell the tone of voice, like maybe you're not a great presenter or something, and that, deters them, like, okay, he might not be that right person to present to a client or things like that. Or, you showed, the compatibility. I feel like that could be biased in some way in that one meeting where it's like, oh, he doesn't meet that criteria, but maybe in the moment you're really nervous and, that's not how you're always with an inter with in a team, you're not always in that situation.
I understand. You're talking more about the principles used in the profiles on the dashboard.
Yeah.
Got it. Yes, but I would let me I could I feel half confident that I can give you a decent answer because we tried at least in the years I was at Bridgewater, we tried every psychometric test under the sun, and we tried to make it go from the psychometric test to being predictive of success. And I would say sort of a direct line like that, it was not very helpful. It was, to your point, it's just a little bit, most of these, especially Principles U, it's talking about preferences. It's not talking, it's not like it's not, again, traits are not fates. Just because you have a preference to be introverted does not mean I could never speak in front of a room.
Yeah.
What we did find it was pretty useful for though, was more like you described it, like using it to have interesting conversations with people about what they're like, to be able to paint a really clear picture of like this role is client facing. This role is going to require you to talk to clients, 8 times a day in really precise, clear ways. Hey, when you took this, you have a strong introversion preference. Is this going to be like a great fit for you or not? Like why or why not? Or how have you dealt with that before? And sometimes you'd get great answers and you'd be like, okay, cool. Like you prefer this way, but you flex and you've shown a track record of doing that. And in other cases, it's really helpful for people to be like, oh, now that I understand, you're right. Like that would be a pretty unnatural position for me to be in. And it's not something I want to flex on. And so we would use it to more for conversations versus decisions would be the way I would say it.
Okay. But if you're
But
like in an interview in general, is that like a decision maker, like whether you get hired or not? Or maybe this could be also useful for giving feedback in general afterwards so you can improve on yourself too, I guess. I'm
yeah,
just,
it will sort of depend on your company's risk tolerance and jurisdiction in the world, whether or not your lawyers want you to give people feedback after the fact.
yeah.
I know that is range. I know there's European countries where that's an absolute no-no. I know there's American companies who choose to make that a no-no. So I would just be mindful of that. But if you have the green light, then yeah, I think it can be great. Like we actually had people taking a lot of these tests. We gave them the results. A lot of it for us, we had a cultural value around the ability to be very self-aware so that you could metabolize feedback. And so another signal for us was, could people look at these tests and sort of ask and answer objective questions about themselves? Like in the same way we do in the program, we would ask them questions of like, well, what surprised you? Or how accurate is this? And then if they said like, oh, it's super accurate, then you'd pick something that wasn't well aligned for the role and say like, oh, well, if it's really accurate and you have this preference, what have you done to deal with that reality? Because that's going to be the other side in this role. Or if it surprised you, well, why did it surprise you? And now that you've been surprised by this, but it's resonating with you, what would you do differently? How would you get better? Again, the literals didn't matter to us as much as the fact that this person was showing a consistent pattern of being able to metabolize and apply feedback. So it's just another way for us to sort of have good conversations and check on whether they were self-aware. That won't be relevant for every company, but for one that is focused on continual improvement and sort of high self-awareness, it can be.
Mhm. Okay.
Cool.
Thanks.
Thank you for the question. I know we're coming upon one, so I suspect we'll miss a lot more people, and I should also go coach the CEO who I coach at 1 o'clock today. So, but thank you all for sticking around, asking the questions. Hopefully, we'd love to see some of you next week in fundamentals. If not, we'd love to see you in May, and if not, we'd just love to see you in our inbox, or on LinkedIn, or on Twitter. We're out there in the world. Please keep the conversation going, and we'll see y'all soon.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers, everyone.
Have a good day.